I'm Amanda.
And I'm Mike. And
this is Saturday Morning Cereal. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Saturday Morning Cereal. I'm Amanda here with Mike, and today we welcome back Cereal fan member Chris, who is a super Star Wars fan. So we are very happy to have him on to discuss Mandalorian Season 3. So, let's kick it off. Mike, do you want to ask the first question?
So, Chris, where do we pick up with Din Djarin and Grogu in Season 3, and where does this journey take them?
So for anyone who by chance didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, surprise, Grogu's back with Mando. But yeah, no, they're on their way to have his redemption arc, which happens very quickly in the story. But yeah, them going to Mandalore and the mines and all that kind of good stuff, and really turned into a different story than I was expecting this season, but not in a bad way. So yeah, the kind of their change and kind of what the story is more for Mandalorians in general, kind of in the big picture, which was an interesting shift.
Yeah, that's what we were just talking about too. We actually just watched the last episode, like probably an hour before we jumped on here. And I was saying it was kind of nice. I mean, I love Grogu. Everyone loves Grogu, but for him to kind of take a back seat in the Jedi journey with that, and they focused on what the title of the show is, and that's the Mandalorians and just their way of life, I guess. It was kind of refreshing to see. And you really liked Bo-Katan, Mike.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Woman in Armor, but Bo-Katan, she's got such confidence, and she can actually use the Darksaber appropriately, unlike Din Djarin. So, it's great to see.
Yeah. So what foreshadowing do we see of the sequel trilogy in the season?
So I mean, you've got a lot of things relating to cloning. Obviously the big thing for those who have obviously seen the series, hopefully, not getting spoiled. But in the penultimate episode, The Spies, you get the Shadow Council, and you have Brendel Hux, so Armitage Hux, Domhnall Gleeson's character. You see his father, who was kind of instrumental in the new stormtrooper program with the First Order, and a lot of those kinds of tie-ins, and you're really starting to see the seeds being planted of the First Order, which is it's fun to see. Glad to see the sequel trilogy kind of getting some little more focus now, and obviously the struggles of the New Republic, which is a big thing too, and dealing with those things, which is always fun to see.
Yeah, I really liked how they kind of just forgave a lot of the people who were working for the Empire, and they just kind of incorporated them into the New Republic. But I see it as a huge downfall too, because then all these people are in positions of power, and they can just go right back to fascism.
Yeah.
I was like, when they showed Daddy Hux, as I called him. I'm like, hey, it's General Hux's daddy. I enjoy Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. I know you guys are impartial to those films.
I like them. I love the sequels. I do have my issues with some of them, but overall, no, I love the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
I like the ideas that are presented in the sequels. I very much like Luke Skywalker training Rey, and I like how now in The Mandalorian, when Luke Skywalker came back and he was training Grogu, it was kind of an inverse and what had been happening in Empire with Yoda training Luke, and now Luke is training whatever species Grogu is. Like that. I just, I didn't really care for The Last Jedi, but that's a different podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So
we got a couple years. We can do a 10-year reflection on The Force Awakens, which is kind of weird to think about.
Because they just announced Daisy Ridley in a new Star Wars film.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later.
Yeah. So anyway, I digress. What is the significance benefits of the dark saber, and how will Mandalore continue without it?
Oh man, I think it's going to be fine. It's going to be better actually. Yeah, those who maybe haven't watched all of the animation, Clone Wars, Rebels, the dark saber has obviously a lot of like mythological um, importance. The first Mandalore and uh, you know the Vizsla family and this Jedi who was also a Mandalorian, and this whole story and the idea that the dark sabers who actually determines who's in power. It's this very Excalibur type mythology, but
What's the
as
Monty
my,
Python quote about
that's
like?
what I'm about to say, right? That somebody handing out swords from pawns is no basis of government. Yeah, it's pretty true for this too. So, yeah, with it being gone, I think, and this I was talking to somebody else about this, that the spies episode again, which is probably one of my favorite episodes of this season, was where Din is talking to Bo-Katan and basically says, I don't follow you because of the dark saber. I follow you because of your character, because of who you are, and I think that it's a good message about leadership and who leads and who is right to lead, and you don't get that authority just because you have something, but because of your actions and who you are. And I think that's an important thing going forward for Mandalorians, because for thousands of years they fought over each other and over the dark saber. And so you take that trinket away, as Moff Gideon likes to say it. You take away that struggle for that thing. So I think it's a good thing that you're able to get past that, and hopefully the Mandalorians can get past that too.
When he broke it, I was like, he broke the dark saber. I was like mortified. I'm like, now what?
So, do you think we will see a return to flashbacks featuring that Jedi who rescued Grogu? Because
Keller and Beck,
yeah,
yeah.
how do you
I,
say his name?
Keller and Beck,
Keller and Beck.
yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at it here on the screen. I'm like, I'm not even gonna try that.
Ah,
I don't know. I think there is still more to tell of Grogu. How did he get from that Naboo starfighter to, in those, pirates' den where, he was discovered by IG-11 and Din. But um, yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to have to serve a purpose to the story going forward. But I mean, I would always love to see Ahmed Best back in Star Wars, and doing what he does best, and no pun intended. But yeah, I think it'd be. I would not be surprised if you see him again. But do I need to? No. Would it be nice? Sure. Why not? I'll take it. But yeah.
mhm. Yeah. What is the biggest Easter egg or Star Wars lore connection in this season that you caught?
Ooh. That was when I saw the questions. I was like, I'm gonna have to rack my brain on that one. I mean, biggest, literally, the mythosaur. you know, that's the first time that you've ever seen one in canon. The only other time one's ever been like depicted was like a role playing book from back in the 90s, and so even that is pretty loose in terms of whether it's actually so to speak canon or whatever it might be. So um, yeah, actually seeing a mythosaur. I mean, when that second episode hit and saw that, I mean, I was literally gasping as I was watching. I was like, "Oh my gosh, are you seriously?" So yeah, that was cool to see. Yeah, and I think obviously in terms of the mythology of Mandalorians, the fact that it's not just a myth, that it's a real thing, and Grogu has his little connection. Sorry, Din Grogu has his connection to him. At the end there, and so I feel like there might be something going forward with him and the mythosaur.
How about you, Mike? What did you catch anything?
Definitely Thawne. Definitely, because I know he was like an expanded universe character, and I know they were just name dropping him like crazy this season. And I assume he's gonna show up in a Ahsoka series.
Yeah.
I want to just like call out the creatures in this season. Like just I don't know what kind of animal creature thing was attacking their little hideaway early on in the season.
Hmm.
but I thought I was watching Jurassic Park for a hot second.
I want to talk about the fact that these Mandalorians never went back to Mandalore because it was so dangerous. But the planet they're on has giant sea creatures
Yeah.
coming out of the water to eat them, and it has like
Right.
pterodactyls flying in, catching kids, and it's like, how is this any less dangerous than Mandalore?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that was actually I was talking to somebody today about that. Actually, one of my students, and they were saying like, why would they live on a planet like that? I was like, and then I get into teacher philosopher mode who talks about Star Wars. I was like, well, if you remember, the armor says like when you walk the way of the Mandalore, you are both the hunter and hunted. So it kind of makes sense that they would put themselves in such a horrible place because it's kind of their philosophy. Like, oh, you're hunter, but you're also hunted, and that's what's going to keep you sharp and smart and those kinds of things. It kind of struggle with the idea of like, yeah, they've taken a lot of our kids, those dinosaur things. I'm like, oh, okay, so you guys, you're fine with that, all right. um, but but no, I think it kind of fits with that theme of hunter and hunted, and obviously the beasts awakening because of the bombing on Mandalore. You're probably seeing some things that even for the Mandalorians are probably like, I did not know that was real. Where did that come from? Especially whatever that giant thing was that destroyed the pirate ship boat, the Mad Maxalorian, vessel in the spies there. But yeah.
Speaking of those like pterodactyl things, like and I know that they caught three of them that were younger ones, and they brought
Mhm.
them to the Mandalorian enclosure. And I'm pretty sure later on in the series, you see one of those things roasting over a bonfire.
Oh God.
I see. I don't think it was one of those. I think it was one of the like winged creatures on Navarro. If you remember
Oh,
from season one that attacked the party because it looked
that's
a little
right.
thinner. So I think it was one of those. So hopefully they're not killing and eating their
Poor baby.
foundling rides.
I'm expecting those creatures to come back and being like dragons equivalent
Right.
to Mandalore. Be like, hey, new dragon.
The armorer is having her Darnarius Targaryen moment.
So, as we were talking about earlier, the season had a lesser focus on Jedi and the Force and instead brought light to the Mandalorians, their culture, and their conflicts. And do you, Chris and Mike, believe Star Wars with less Jedi works?
Mike, you want to go first?
I saw Andor and I was like, well, this is great. It completely changed the type of genre that Star Wars is known for, and it turned it from like a mythological show to kind of like a political, like spy thriller. And they didn't really mention Jedi at all. And I felt like seeing seeing the world without the Jedi and having that contrast to what we saw in the prequels where Jedi's were everywhere, I thought worked really well. And I think going forward with the Jedi's, less is more.
Hmm. Yeah, I think no, I agree with that. I think Andor was obviously that's its own beast, and I don't want to always compare shows because they're definitely their own thing. But I think there's a place for Jedi, and they're not necessary in every story. And I think this season kind of showed that. Yeah, you have Grogu using the Force and tossing various enemies around and weapons, and it's always good fun to see that and have a little puppet use the Force like that. But it's not necessary to the story, which is good. You aren't just shoehorning it in there because well, Star Wars, you have to have Jedi. Like, does the story need it? And I think this season in particular said no. Moff Gideon and him wanting to have the Force. There's obviously some more moral questions about that, and some bigger themes that tie in with that idea. But no, I think there's time and place for it, and I think they've maybe got a good grasp on what they want to actually show or don't show, and when to have Jedi, when not to, and I'm looking forward to the future to kind of see where some of that stuff fits.
Plus, it's Star Wars. I mean, there's so many stories to tell outside of the Jedi. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Jedi obviously police the galaxy, but like
hmm,
you could tell a whole story just about a droid.
right,
Like
yeah,
like you could have a whole story about
R5.
R5. I was just telling someone at work how much entertaining it would be to do a short story about R2D2 and his perspective during the Skywalker saga, and then just have
Mhm.
subtitles of what he is speaking in binary.
Yeah, that movie would probably be rated R. Let's be honest. So,
I know. I always love the R2D2 C3PO interactions in the movies. Yeah, I would love just a movie about just the droids just hanging out and interacting with each
yeah,
other.
and they had announced. I mean, this was, I don't remember if this was one of the IgerCon, like, phone calls to investors, or if it was one of the, Disney Plus video announcement things that they were doing during COVID. But I remember they talked about doing a droid story series. I don't know if it was animated or 3D animated or whatever it was, but they had mentioned that. So that's kind of one that has kind of disappeared from conversation. So I
Yeah.
don't know what's going on with that one, but I think that's kind of right up the alley of what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, and too, just regarding how there wasn't much like Force and, Jedi stuff in this season, I really like how when the past seasons we're watching, we expect Grogu to be returned to where he came from, or just to Luke Skywalker, stay with Luke Skywalker because that's familiar. That's where he's going to thrive. But in the end, he chooses the Mandalorians. He chooses Din Djarin and just the way of the Mandalore. And I think that was just really just refreshing to see that it didn't go the way people might have expected it.
Hmm.
So, in your opinion, Chris, who is the Mandalorian? Is it Bo-Katan? Is it Grogu? Is it Din Djarin? Who is the title character of the show?
It's still Din Djarin. I mean, obviously, it's turned into more of an ensemble now that the story's kind of branching out, and it's not just this lone gunslinger making his way through the galaxy kind of thing. He's still the driving force of the story, even though I know a lot of people are like, well, he took a back seat to everything. But this season doesn't happen if he doesn't go on his quest to Mandalore in the first place. Like he goes to Bo-Katan, and because of that, Bo-Katan gets involved in everything, and everything kind of goes after that. So no, I mean it's still his show, and look at the ending. Obviously, it's
Hmm.
still going to be him going forward. So no, yeah, it's definitely still him. But this season, you could have definitely put a tiny little S at the end of the title to be a little more accurate, because yeah, it was definitely a story of Mandalorians in general. Um, which, I mean, you could also look at the mythology and maybe even say that this is a story of the title of the Mandalorian or the Mandalore. What does it mean to be Mandalorian, and be that leader, or are you that person that's Hope when Grogu looks up in the first episode, and Din Djarin's there to save him, or are you something to be feared? So I think it's kind of wrestling with some of those things too. But yeah, it's still Din's show for sure.
Yeah, definitely Bo Katan rose up in this season too. Because I'm learning about defamation in class and stuff, and she definitely was outcasted, but then came back and really proved herself too. So I mean,
Hmm.
I was calling her bluff like every episode. I'm like, she's up to something. She's up to something. But she wasn't up to anything. Like she was truly there. She was truly the leader. So that was nice.
Yeah. Speaking of defamation, how did you feel about all the conversations? I don't know how much you guys followed as much, maybe I did, but the conversations online of like, who's the other spy? The armor, they're a traitor, or is it, Coscarees, or is it, Axe Woves, or like any of those kind of things? Like, there's some defamation there for sure. Where so a lot of people were like tweeting at Emily Swallow, like, I apologize, you were straight, you were good. Like,
We'll just blame Babu Frick for everything.
absolutely. It's always the Enzellen's
Yeah,
fault.
Babu Frick. So does this time period, and this question is right up your alley, Chris, does this time period in Star Wars remind you of any real world history as a history buff?
Um, I don't.
Can I
This was
take a
another one
stab
I
at
was kind of
this?
I was kind of thinking on this one. It almost makes me think of like an alternative history of, and this is kind of what J.J. Abrams talked about with the Force Awakens, but it's almost like an alternative history of what if there was, a little bit more of Nazi Germany that hung out afterwards and was able to somehow still maintain power and authority somewhere. So it's kind of a, almost more of a what if of history that I'm kind of connecting, and because I was him focusing more on like the old or the New Republic and its kind of failings, and what it was not doing to really kind of take care of what was still out there. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, to me at least, I feel like it's kind of treading its own little path. I'm sure there's probably some person who could probably speak about some random European empire at some point in time in history. They're like, oh, well, actually, it's like this, but that's probably way more specific than even my own knowledge base. So,
It reminds me a lot of the Reconstruction period in America after the Civil War, where you had this massive conflict, but then you also kind of had like pieces being put in place that would later come into like what more fascism, as I said, like
yeah,
potentially
no,
how
yeah,
like you know how like a lot of people nowadays have a lot of problems with the police and racism and everything, but the original police I think were like slave gatherers, like they would hunt
yeah,
down
yeah. They're slave posses, and no,
slaves.
I could absolutely see that. Yeah.
And now like we have something that we took for a position to do after we basically granted them immunity, and we said okay,
Hmm.
it's fine, and then they come back and they just plant these little seeds that later come into like bigger problems.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's actually a pretty fair analogy, I would say. Of, I mean, you could argue that the First Order early on is almost like a terrorist organization, like the Klan was. So, um, you know, no, I could definitely see that being a pretty fair comparison.
So, what lessons can we learn about our society from The Mandalorian?
Ooh, there's so much in
I
this
think,
season.
yeah, my take on this is everyone you're stronger when you're unified with every like your fellow man. When you all come together, you can really make a difference. You can really take on like a big threat if you're all on board, if you're all on the same page. And I think that's definitely something society, especially here in America, can learn.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and how great it was is that like even though the Mandalorians had like two different fractions, and they had people who were like extremists and cultists, and then they had people who were more casual about it. Like they were both just Mandalorians, and they didn't define being a Mandalorian by being in one group or the other. And Bo Katan was able to walk the aisle and say, "Hey, we're both Mandalorians, and the real
Mhm.
threat is this."
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, that's a big thing. For me, I think the biggest. This is kind of going back to the New Republic stuff, and but it also ties in with Din and Bo, and um, and not necessarily society, but for an individual, like the idea of change, your ability to change yourself, change your identity, who you want to be compared to maybe what society wants you to be. That was, for the third episode, the convert. I mean, the convert in itself is this, but where you have Pershing who, oh, I want to change, I want to help the New Republic, but yet at the same time he still wants to do his, his cloning and stuff because he's getting drawn back to that. You have um, the why am I blanking on her name right now? The Katie O'Brien's character, who is basically clearly the spy who's working for Gideon on the inside, but here's somebody who doesn't want to change at all and is playing that role. But then you have somebody like Jack Black, Captain Bombardier, who he was part of that program, but clearly wanted to change and make those shifts, and got to marry Lizzo in the process. But
Yeah.
that, like, I think to me that's the big story of this. Like Bo-Katan, her arc of she starts by like, well, I don't have the dark saber, so I can't have my forces. Well, yeah, she does get the dark saber, but for her, it's more about the unifying and what does it mean to be a Mandalorian, and she kind of picks that up a little bit from the covert and her change. And I think this is maybe one of the places where people feel like Din Djarin wasn't that much of a character arc because a lot of his change came in the first two seasons. Um, but I think this season for him was just more of kind of an affirmation of the changes he made and that who he became. And
He's a
but
lot
yeah,
he's a lot more loosey goosey in this season.
hmm
Yeah, he's having fun.
Yeah.
right,
I liked it. And I just really loved how Lizzo just was like, surprise in this episode with Jack Black because I love
yeah,
Lizzo, but I did not know she could act. And it was just a treat to see her just like cuddling with Grogu and in her Lizzo fashion. I loved it.
right.
I was
I
here for it.
yeah, I was happy for her because you know, I won't lie, like when I first watched, like, oh hey, it's Jack Black. Oh hey, it's Lizzo. Oh hey,
Yeah.
it's Doc Brown. You know, like
Yeah.
obviously that episode was like everybody.
It
But
was a red carpet. It literally
yeah,
was. They just kept coming. They just kept feeding us.
yeah, and like, and I was happy for Lizzo because you know, obviously, I mean, yeah, I know her music, but I don't necessarily follow her as much as maybe other people do. But seeing her, you know, social media posts and talking about how her dad took her to go see Star Wars and how she fell
Yeah.
in love with it and how she's such a fan and it just kind of, you know, it almost kind of speaks to how I feel about a lot of things with fandoms now, where I'm like, just let people have fun with stuff. Stop
Yep.
being so critical all the time. Like, here's somebody who loves Star Wars who finally gets to be in a Star War, and you know, and what do you get are people who are like, why is she in this? All this kind of stuff. Like, it, I don't know, like that's that type of negativity to me. I'm just like, I don't need it. So
You know,
I
it's
was
just
just
so
I was happy for her. Yeah.
wild how people manifest roles because I'm going a little off topic here, but Ariana Grande with Glinda as Wicked or in Wicked, you know, she manifested that role forever and now she got casted in it and people are just like, you know, and I mean, I was a little skeptic too because the role of Glinda has high notes, but
Hmm.
um you know, she's the role's in good hands and we just got to let it's like you said, fandom, you just got to let people have their fun.
Hmm.
And that's what we really, you know, want to bring that message out in our podcast. It's like we're fans, we're nerds of so many things and don't let people get you down with that,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and like, you know, I have my criticisms of this season and other things too, but
Yeah.
same time, it's I'm not gonna, you know, say like, well, Star Wars is dead now, or you know, Star
Right,
Wars is
right.
gone woke. Like, no, it's just okay. Maybe I didn't like this one thing, but overall, like, you know, if you're looking at the themes, you're looking at what the message the show's trying to tell you. You know, it's all Star Wars. It's all good. So.
Mhm.
I think it had a very great open ending. It felt in a way like a serious finale, but
Hmm.
now, but it also like the next season could be like a new pilot. Like now the
Right.
status quo is instead of like this Mandalorian that Mandalorian this, it's just about Din Djarin and Grogu just going out and having adventures and him teaching Grogu what it is to be a Mandalorian. And it's
Right.
just they could continue this for another season. They could go another 5 seasons. Like the book is open, and they get to decide when they close it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it
So,
had a very like end of Return of the Jedi kind of ending. You know what I mean? Like, here's our stars, and we're gonna Iris wipe down into them, which that was super adorable. And then you know, and here's the end. You know what I mean? Without even actually saying the end. So, but yeah, it's obviously the stories are still gonna exist, and you know, when you know basically went and said like, hey, you need an independent contractor to go take out these Imperial remnants. You know, so maybe that's what Rangers of the New Republic was, and now it's independent contractors of the New Republic. Who knows? But you know, so we'll see where that goes.
I'm still cracking up over here, like 2 hours later after watching the episode of Grogu just jumping onto the bar counter and just starting to scarf down those chicken nuggets or whatever those were.
Whatever. It looked like pork rinds to me. I don't know what.
Yeah. It's just he just doesn't question where it came
Nope.
from, what it is. He just starts stuffing his face. And that leads us into ranking your favorite season. And I personally liked season 2. That one's my favorite because I like the learning curves thrown at Grogu. I just love Grogu, and I just really like seeing him acting as like a toddler growing up, and Din Djarin just saying, "No, Grogu, like no, you can't eat that, you can't have that."
Hmm.
But then to him being like a serious Jedi in the end with Luke Skywalker, I like that. But I really did enjoy this season too because, like I said, I really enjoyed the episode with like Lizzo, Jack Black, Christopher Lloyd, and I did enjoy Bo Katan. I'm more of a fan now than I was when I first saw her. Yeah. So how about you, Chris? What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I'd probably still have to stick with season two as my favorite. I mean, the the nerd tears were quite real in that season finale of seeing Luke Skywalker again. Even though obviously the deep fake stuff got better for Book of Boba Fett, but I still got to go with season two in terms of maybe favorite. I mean, all the seasons have their merits, and we're all great in their own. But if I was ranking them, season two would be up top, and then right underneath it would be seasons one and three. So.
Mhm.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't really care for season two.
No.
I felt like they turned Mando into Tony Stark, and they turned him into the Iron Man 2 equivalent. They just
Hmm.
had all these characters bouncing around and cameos and everything, and it was like, what's his story? So,
Mm-hmm.
but I still enjoyed season two, and being a more casual Star Wars fan, like Ahsoka showing up and all those fun little cameos. It didn't mean as much to me as it would to you, but I
Mm-hmm.
understand that.
That's fair.
And season one and three, I think, are both great and both interchangeable. I'd probably put them in first place,
Mhm.
but season two to a lesser extent.
Yeah. So, what do you guys want to see from the next season?
Mm, whatever they want to give me. I'm good. like I mean I'm kind of one of those where like I love to just kind of work with whatever's been given. I don't know if I guess if I had to give expectations, maybe just some new locations, maybe some little bit more of this expansion of whatever the Imperial remnant threat is. Obviously, Thrawn is being set up as the kind of big bad going forward here, but obviously there's other characters from the kind of extended like novel canon of things that might be cool to bring in. But yeah, I mean, honestly, they could just do something completely out of left field and still probably be good and completely change whatever maybe I think might be. So yeah, like was said, this season almost felt like a series finale. So I think whatever they want to do going forward, they've kind of got open canvas to play with.
I still stand by my desire. I want to see baby Kylo Ren or baby Ben Solo so bad.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a really great CGI Harrison Ford walking around out there. We know it. Bring
Right.
him back.
How about you, Mike? What do you want to see in season 4?
Um, I definitely enjoy the more foreshadowing that they've given the sequel trilogy. And I definitely like the smaller, more contained stories. And I think going forward, I like to see more serialized stories, like more just
Mhm.
adventure basis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, yeah. Now that kind of thinking, I was just kind of thinking back. It's like, what have we seen that kind of disappeared? Um, I kind of almost, I know it's going back to Tatooine, but I almost kind of want to know what's going on with Boba Fett and Cobb Vanth and all that stuff from Book of Boba Fett because I mean none of that was obviously brought up here, and they obviously left some cliffhangers there in that season or show or however you want to call it, Mandalorian 2.5. But um, kind of, I'd be interested to see kind of where some of that stuff might tie back in, and Cobb Vance joining in, or Boba Fett joining in, or Fennec Shand, or any of these people that were part of that. Black Chrysanthemum. Let's get some giant Wookiees in here to rip some arms off. So be interesting to see.
So, Chris, a lot of announcements have been announced at Star Wars Celebration. So, could you just kind of guide us through what we can expect from Star Wars in the future?
Yeah. So May 4th, we've got Visions. Super excited for season two of that. There's some cool stuff there. Young Jedi Adventures looks super adorable if you've got little kids. Nubs is probably the most adorable thing to happen to Star Wars since Baby Grogu. So I need to get a little one of him to put on my desk. I mean, you got Jedi Survivor coming out next week. I mean, that's just in the next 2 weeks. But yeah, I guess big stuff coming forward. You've got Ahsoka in August. Um, I know that they had some trailers and things for other series that nothing was officially shown, and I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible so I can actually see it the way it should be. But the Acolyte, story set in the High Republic, kind of the end of that period, and the Sith reemerging, so to speak. Skeleton Crew with Jude Law, which from everything I've heard, the idea that it's like Amblin style story in Star Wars, that they've kind of nailed that visually and kind of theme. So, I think that's going to be a cool thing to see. And then, yeah, obviously the movies. James Mangold doing a Dawn of the Jedi film that he's describing as Cecil B. DeMille, Ten Commandments, Origin of the Force, religious epic. Just looks like that's going to be something pretty cool. Dave Filoni directing on film, kind of the culmination of all of this stuff that's been on the TV series and this rise of the First Order, or the failures of the New Republic, however you want to define that. But yeah, as we said before, Daisy Ridley coming back and new Jedi Order, and obviously there's a lot of new possibilities there. Maybe other people coming back, and it'll just be interesting to see where that goes. I'm really excited for that one because I think I don't know of many people who actually have fair criticisms of those films who can really fault Daisy Ridley for what she did, and Ray's portrayal. And I'm just feeling bad though for John Williams, because I think the guy just wants to keep retiring. And Daisy Ridley coming back, and he said, like, I don't want anybody scoring Ray except for me. I'm like, just hopefully he's able to pass that baton up, because I don't know how much longer he's going to be doing this.
Like, I hate how people hate her. Like,
Yeah,
come on, why? There's nothing to hate. I love her accent. I love her as Ray. I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to possibly Finn coming back in that
hmm
episode and getting more of what he was neglected to his first three movies.
Yeah,
The
and you
guy
know what?
is force sensitive, and they need to
Yeah,
explore that.
yeah, and you know what? I think if John Boyega is good with coming back, then yeah, because obviously he also had some horrible backlash of obviously racist vitriol and stuff like that, which is obviously completely uncalled for, and not there's no place and spot in Star Wars. Clearly missing the big picture there if you're that kind of a mindset. But obviously if he's ready to come back to it, that's great. Kind of, I hate to say it, it's the same thing that happened with Hayden Christensen. It's Jake Lloyd, Ahmed Best, like all these people that have had those types of experiences coming into Star Wars, which is it's just
What's
sad
the
to see. But
person who played the Inquisitor on Obi-Wan?
yeah, Moses Ingram, who
Yes.
I liked her. She was good,
That
and
was a good character.
I loved
yeah,
her. Yeah, one of my favorite Star Wars villains.
yeah,
Or anti-hero. Well, however you want to describe her.
right, yeah.
Her. Yeah.
I just want to talk about the fact that even though no one's really talking about it too much, but there's been a Knights of the Old Republic video game remake announced.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they just changed studios, so they weren't doing a well enough job, I guess, and Lucasfilm or whoever just gave it to another studio, so that'll be coming out. I'm looking forward to sitting down with Amanda and watching her play through that great story, which is one of the best Star Wars stories ever told. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for coming on and just giving us that Star Wars insight, I guess.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. Always love coming on and talking.
Yeah.
Never a bad day to talk Star Wars.
Oh, no. Well, and May the 4th is coming up, so May the 4th be with you all. We got some exciting Lucasfilm movies coming out, shows, probably all coming out on Disney Plus for the most part. There's nothing coming in theaters.
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, yeah.
I forgot about that, which we are covering in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Shameless plug. But I hope you guys all have a great week. Let us know if you have watched The Mandalorian Season 3, what your thoughts are, and we will talk to you next time.